There's days where my account will go up 2%. There's days where it'll go up 20%. I'm happy with either, right? Because I'm not trying to get to some set number in my mind. I realize that to be a successful, consistent trader, you've got to have really a long-term view in mind.
Welcome back, everybody, to Be the Trader. Today, I have a very special guest. If you follow me on Twitter, you might have noticed I post a question of any potential future guests that you may know to make sure to DM me or tag me and that person. And you guys did a great job, tagged me with a lot of other people. And one of those tags was Nate Davis. And so I brought Nate Davis today, who's been trading for around 2 years. And his story, we're both about to learn it completely. So I'm excited to talk to him. And apparently he does long and short, and he does a little bit of whatever the market kind of is acting like. He'll maybe scalp, he'll maybe swing, he'll maybe just day trade. So Nate, welcome to the show, my man.
Good to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no worries. No worries. So I got your name from a lot of people, actually, from quite a few different people. Some people that I kind of know through, Twitter, if you do know someone, right? And, excuse me. So, yeah. And so if anything, I'd like to get to know you a little bit more. Can you tell us a little bit about, what got you into trading, and we'll go from there?
Yeah. So for me, I started really getting interested in trading a couple of years ago. Part of that has to do with my job. I'm a pastor. So we don't exactly have some of the most financial security when you're looking at your future. I've got 4 kids. My wife and I, we do foster care. And so I was trying to think through how I could be a better steward of my money, how I could make stuff work for me. And at that time, I was getting ready to finish up my doctorate. I did that in adolescent psychology. And, I found myself like with all this extra time in my hand, because I'd been in this rhythm while I was writing my dissertation of getting up at 3 a.m, doing a couple hours of work, doing a couple hours of work after the kids went to bed. And so I just said, hey, now that I'm done with this thing, I'm going to take all of that time, all of that energy I invested into this thing, and I'm going to put it in the trading. I'm going to learn how it works. I'm going to try to figure out markets and just really, learn how I can take advantage of this opportunity that's sitting right in front of me.
So how I guess you could, I got a couple of questions, but one of them is, it seems like when we talked a little bit right before we got started, it seemed like it happened pretty quickly. And, been 2 years trading, finding consistency. Walk us through that. And why do you think you were able to like kind of find your own niche, if you will, pretty quick? In my opinion, that's only my opinion. So I get that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think honestly, a part of it was just the drive that I had to do this. There are a lot of people that I've interacted with and talked with who've been literally trading for years, and they are still trying to figure out their niche. They're still trying to figure out how to be consistently profitable. And I think their problem is they just didn't develop a system. Right. They didn't figure out what's going to work for me, what's going to work in these different market environments. And so, probably the first 6 months to a year, like I dedicated so much time to trying to learn as much as I could about trading. So I probably read something like 50, 60 books on trading. I went and found some of the best people who trade different styles. So I'd look at guys who trade OTC, people who are long bias, swing traders, short sellers. And I said, I want to learn from all of these people. And in the process of doing that, I was really able to develop 4 or 5 different systems that I would then employ based on what the market was doing. Like, so right now we've got a really crappy market. It's super choppy, right? So I'm not exactly going to be going super long on a lot of stuff. I'm going to be focusing more on doing scalps and things of that nature. OTCs are obviously really terrible right now when we're recording this, so I'm not spending much time in there. But I think it was just the amount of time that I put into it, the amount of energy, the dedication, and really just saying like, I'm not going to give up on this until I'm actually successful.
True. And I get that completely. I love it. You said that. But at the same time, what were the specific steps that you took to help you kind of get that down? Because yes, you can go look at many different ways of trading, right? But there's also that difficulty if you're watching all these different ways that you're kind of lost, right? So I'm trying to understand, how were you able to discern what kind of was valuable to you, and how were you able to kind of figure out what worked for you without just losing for a long time? Because you walk us through that part of how you figured that out.
Yeah. So, obviously when I first started, I was focusing mostly on swing trading, right? That's what I wanted to do. And I actually had a couple paper trading accounts set up where while I was doing something that worked for me, like swing trading, I was focusing on developing a system for some of these different areas, right? So I'd go paper trade, I'd use TOS. I also have one on Webull that I would use. And I would experiment with different systems on those before I actually put any money into it. And people like bag on paper trading all the time. They talk about the psychology. It doesn't work. It's not real money. But I was okay with it because I knew this is helping me develop a system before I actually put any real capital into it. And so I would treat it as if it was real money, right? I wouldn't go and hit the refresh to put another 100 grand into the account. I would say, man, this is it. Like if I lose this all, I know the system doesn't work. I need to start over and develop a new one.
Interesting. I love that you said that because I used to hate on, like, not out loud, but in my head, like I just didn't really like paper trading, but I do paper trading too when I'm trying a different strategy out because it helps a lot. So you're not burning out your mental capital and your real capital on your real account. So I'm glad you said that because it's a great option to do while you're trading something that works for you. Maybe not risk your real money on something that you're not sure about. Now, when it comes to swing trading, because that was your first, if you will, niche, what kind of stuck out to you? Why was it swing trading? Is it because you were a pastor and you had to, kind of work and trade, and now you're kind of doing both? So like you obviously still have that time to do swing trading, day trading, scalping. So what made you go to swing trading first?
Honestly, for me, it felt like the safest kind of play to get into while I was figuring out the markets, right? Because, when you start out, like you have a big winner and then all of a sudden you're like, dude, I can do this. I'm going to start throwing like huge size into these different trades. But the problem is trades work against you, right? Like today we saw so many different knives happen on all these different day trades. And if I was in any of them going like, yeah, I'm going to put like my whole account into this trade, and then a knife happens and that thing drops 15, 20%, like I am out a whole lot of money in that. And so for me, I said, I'm going to do something safer, treat it much more kind of like, a Roth IRA or something like that, where I'm going to sit the money down, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to look at catalysts that are upcoming. My money's safe. It's growing. It's a safe thing right now, but I'm going to focus on learning other things while I do that. For me, it was just, honestly, it was risk management. It was not wanting to blow all my money, get so discouraged that I just gave up and quit and walked away.
At any point where you just constantly like, I got to get this by the end of this year because I want to support my family. You said you foster kids, like you have your own kids as well, and you're a pastor. So, pastors, I don't know anything about pastors and income, but you were saying it may not be the best way to retire on. So with that idea, was there ever another sense of like, you got to get this within X, or I gotta do this by this date? Like, were you ever feeling that?
No. I mean, even though I'm in ministry, like I make enough to support my family, to care for my family, right? So I don't have any pressing needs. And so, I really believe that, 9 times out of 10, when we put that kind of pressure on ourselves, it causes us to make poor decisions. And so I never put that like date in mind or that number in mind because I knew like, man, if I do that, like I'm going to start playing sloppy because I'm not letting a play or a system work for me. I'm actually trying to force it to do what I want it to do. So if I put like an arbitrary number out there and said, hey, I need to be at $1 million by the end of the year, it's like, well, shoot, man, like then suddenly allowing a play to work for me and being able to cut something that's not the goal anymore. The $1 million is the goal. And sometimes the market's not ready to give you that. And so by not having that kind of goal, I've actually given myself the freedom to just be able to play what's in front of me. There's days where my account will go up 2%. There's days where it'll go up 20%. I'm happy with either, right? Because I'm not trying to get to some set number in my mind. I realize that to be a successful, consistent trader, you've got to have really a long-term view in mind. You've got to be thinking 10, 15, 20 years to get to that number that you want to get. If you want to get to it, within the next year, right? If you want to be like the next Zach Morris and then 3 years make like $40-50 million, like, man, you are setting yourself up for some serious disappointment and discouragement.
True. But I have to ask you this, is there any time during that experience of when you first started to place trades, okay, how long, I need to know this too, how long did it take you to stop losing money, to breaking even or just making money? How long did that take you?
Yeah, so it took me a couple months, I would say, to get to a place where I was consistently profitable. Like early on, it would be like, hey, I'd go up 40%, go down 30%, go up 20%, drop down 40%, right? So, the first 2 months, I was probably net negative like 50% of my account. But that's where developing the systems really started to play in, where it's like, cool, I've learned what doesn't work. I've learned what's not safe for me. I've learned about risk management and not throwing my whole account into one trade, but actually learning how to size in and scale in and to be able to take stuff off when, that's one of the biggest things too for me is like, can I pull stuff off when it's still going up, knowing that if it goes back down, I can rebuy it, right? A lot of people don't do that. You've got to have a plan for when things are going down and when they're going up. I didn't have that the first 2 months, but once I developed it, that's when things really started to change for me. I could have a trade that completely goes against me, but it's not going to break me. It's not going to put me in deep red because I know when to cut.
So, when you say 2 months, I know people are going to listen to this. We're going to have some people who go, nah, that's not real.
Yeah.
We're going to have some people who go, let me learn a little more. Right. And so I'm that person right now. Let me learn a little more. So I want to know, for those first 2 months, to me, it took me 3 years just to find consistency, and I'm still working on my stuff. Right. And so I respect you 100%. I love that you did it so quickly. And I think a lot of it has to do with your mindset of how you were focused on really just process and not really focused on, I got to get here by here. You just want to just do well and trade well. So you're focused on execution. But I still got to ask you, in those first 2 months, you said, it was just about understanding the mistakes I made and understanding what didn't work and making adjustments. How did you understand those mistakes? How did you not repeat those mistakes? Like, was there a process that you did to make sure you didn't repeat mistakes? Because a lot of people know their mistakes, right? A lot of people see what they do and they're like, man, you know what, Nate? If I only stopped doing X, I think I'd be profitable. So how did you keep track of that in such a pretty quick time? So I'm very curious, how'd you do that? How'd you do that?
Yeah. So this is where I think my background in schooling has actually been kind of an asset. So my whole doctoral stuff was in psychology, really focusing on young people and that kind of stuff. But like, I am just a real firm believer that one of the things that makes or breaks a good trader is their mindset. It's, can you get to a place where you don't allow emotions to control you? Right. I think we can all analyze the backside of a trade and be able to go like, oh man, I totally messed up there. Right. I was totally chasing. I got FOMO. I shouldn't have went in there. I didn't actually do any research on the company. Right. I didn't know that they had a shelf offering they could drop. Like, we can all look at that stuff on the backside. But the real challenge that a lot of us have is in the midst of a trade. Right. If it's going for us, if it's going against us, can we actually objectively step outside of our emotions and look at the thing for what it is and say, okay, I know about this company. I know what's happening. I know this chart setup, right? There's wedge or whatever it is. Like, I know all of this stuff. Can I make a decision just based off of that and take my happiness or my sorrow, if I'm up or if I'm down, out of the equation? And so I think, honestly, the thing that allowed me to do so well and to do this so quickly has been my ability to do that very thing, right? To trade, essentially, I hear people talk about all the time, but to trade like a robot, to say, okay, I'm gonna pull my emotions out of it. I can celebrate a win or a loss and mourn it. I can do all that when the market closes. But while I'm actually trading, there is zero emotion. It is just all execution. It is all strategy. It is all a plan that I've previously laid out. So I think that's been the thing that has allowed me to do it, is to be able to understand myself, to understand my emotions, to understand the things that are driving me, and to actually master those things so that they don't control me and keep me in a trade too long or get me into a trade too early.
I know. So are you saying that you didn't fall into your own emotions during that first 2 months?
No, I think the first couple months I was doing that, but then that's when I actually started to say, dude, all this stuff I learned at school, I could fully apply all of this to this trading thing that I'm doing. And so I essentially brought my education into it and said, man, this is just a game. That's all this is, right? It's like a game of chess. Yeah. I've got to be strategic. I got to get the emotions out. I've got to be able to identify when I'm getting emotional. And if I am, then I'm going to cut it.
So walk me through how you think about, I'm very curious now, because I love that you said it's a game to you, because I had a conversation with another trader just last week, Jack Kellogg. He's been on the show a couple of times, but he's going to be on the show again because he just crossed like some dumb number. And I don't really care about, like, everyone knows P&L doesn't matter. Process matters, right? But he thinks of it like a game too. And he thinks of it like emotions out. And you have to, it seems that way. But I'm very curious to get in your head now because, you know, you're a doctor in psychology, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I did a lot of, it's not technically in psychology, but that was what I wrote my dissertation on. It was like adolescent psychology and stuff of that nature.
Okay. So you had some studying in psychology. And so I want to know when you're trading now and when you're kind of reviewing, like, how do you review, or how do you also, like, how do you review? Like, how do you review your month, your day, your week?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I sit down and I look at every trade that I made and I say, why did I get into this trade? What worked about this trade and what didn't work about this trade? And then I ask another question, which I don't think a lot of people do, is if I could go back and trade this differently, what would I do and why? Right? That's the big piece there. It's not what would I do differently. It's like, oh, I would have held it because it halted up a little bit later. It's like, no, like I've got to be able to identify the clear why of a trade. And so it's super simple. I do that at the end of every day. I typically do that every morning as I'm looking at the market, trying to figure out what am I going to get into, which kind of style am I going to adopt and adapt to be able to play with today, right? You know, where's the market going? Okay, cool. Then here's some of the trades I'm looking at. Here's why I'm looking at these trades. Here's what intrigues me about these trades. And here's also some of the dangers that could happen with these trades. Mm-hmm. And so I do obviously review at the end of the day, but then I do kind of that pre-market plan as well, which has been very, very helpful for me.
So when you're planning the pre-market, it's interesting because you have so many different ways of trading. You were saying like, it depends on what style I'm trading. Would you say that, like, how are you, like, I'm very curious on how you were able to really, well, it's been 2 years now, but how you've been able to like really niche down and find these, how many setups would you say you trade? Like, is it like multiple? Is it like a dozen, or do you even consider it like a setup?
Yeah, I wouldn't even consider them setups, man. I just look, what's here? What can I play? Which direction's it going? How could I end up green at the end of the day? I know that some people are like exclusively breakout traders, right? That's all they want to do. Other people are like, I'm only looking for bottom plays. But all of those plays exist on any given day in any kind of a market, right? And so my goal is, how do I identify this play and play it this way, while at the same time playing another play a different way? I might be doing swing trading, breakout trading, bottom, finding the bottom on something and doing something for like a long-term investment while playing OTCs, while shorting another stock, all at the same time. And, I think a part of that for me is I've just always had this capacity where I could do a lot of stuff. I mean, come on, I'm like 33, I got a doctorate, and I did that while I had 4 kids all under the age of 10, like my capacity has always been a little bit more. And so I've said, man, if I can do this and if I can develop the systems, I'm just going to go for it. And if I lose, that's fine. I started this whole journey with a couple $100. That's all I ever put into the market.
Interesting. So how do you manage your risk when it sounds like you're in multiple plays every day? It sounds like you're in multiple plays. So how do you look at risk and how do you manage that? If you're like swinging here, do you have multiple accounts? Like how do you manage that?
Yeah, so I've got 3 separate accounts that I use. I've got my Roth IRA, which is where I'm trying to do more of my swing trading of like, hey, here's stuff I'm going to park. It might be here for a couple months. I don't have to look at that as much. I've definitely got news alerts that are set in case, a new filing drops at the SEC or somebody drops a short report. Thank you, Hindenburg on Clove, all those months ago. So I've got that. When I'm doing OTCs, I'm typically in TOS. And then for a lot of my momentum plays and for breakout plays, I like to trade those in my Webull. So I've kind of got like a 4 monitor setup here, and each account's pulled up in a different area, as well as my scanners and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it's been helpful. Like by having those accounts separate, like whenever I'm looking at a certain screen, my mind automatically goes into that mode. So if I'm over here looking at my OTC stuff, I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm thinking OTC. If I'm up here, I'm thinking about my long-term Roth IRA. And then again, if I'm over here, I'm definitely thinking about just my day trades, my options plays and stuff like that. And so I've kind of trained my mind a little bit even on that of like, hey, whichever direction you're looking, that's what you're thinking about right now. I try not to even though I've got multiple plays that are running at the same time, whenever I am focused on one play, that thing has all of my attention while the other ones don't.
And so what about in terms of it's very difficult for me to understand. It seems like everything's been pretty easy for you right now. So I want to know right now, what has been the hardest part of this journey for you? Like what was something, because there had to be a moment where things were just like, where you're just like either questioning something, or maybe you're like it was a struggle for you. Was there ever that type of moment?
I'll be fully honest, man. There hasn't. And that moment could be coming again, but a lot of it too, bro, I think could be the mentality that I bring into this, right?
Yeah.
We talk about psychology. I talked about that. Like,
yeah,
my mood, my disposition, my ability to execute as a trader, it's not based on what's actually happening in, the markets. I've got a deeper why that's actually driving why I do a lot of what I do. On the one hand, there's definitely that retirement piece there, but for me and my wife, like, our goal is to be able to make as much money as we can so that we can give it away, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got this bigger thing that I'm chasing in life than just getting a bigger house and a bunch of Lambos. And having that be the end goal has allowed me to just not get overwhelmed, to not get brought down if a play goes against me or anything like that, right? It's that psychological state of mind, like there's something bigger in life that I'm getting after. And so I talk with a lot of guys who slide into my DMs and they want to they want me to help them. And I do. And I spend a lot of time messaging these guys. I've spent several hours on the phone with some of them. And I think the problem and the reason that they get so overwhelmed at times is because trading actually becomes their life. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing or anything like that, but like, when everything that happens in the market becomes the sum of who you are and the sum of what you're living for, man, I don't know, dude, like that can just be an incredibly discouraging place. And it can be overwhelming, right? Because if the market is crap, then suddenly you feel like crap because your whole identity is wrapped up in being a trader. For me, I just look at trading like this is just a tool, right? I've got other things I want to do in life, and this is just a really great tool and vehicle that could help me achieve some of these things that I want to do. And so since that is my perspective going into trading, it's like, cool, then I'm like, if the tool breaks, I'll get a new tool. Right. Trading is something I'm doing right now to advance this other thing that I want to do. And that's been probably the thing that's kept me from getting discouraged, that's kept me from getting overwhelmed. And that's just advice I'd give to anybody who's listening to this podcast. Like, man, have something bigger you're living for, because it makes all of the madness and the chaos of being in the markets all throughout the day so much easier to navigate. Because when you shut it off, you actually have something else that you're going to, something else that fulfills you and brings you life.
I love that you said that. And I think everyone needs to re-listen what you just said, because that's a very valid point. It's so important to make sure that you can have something maybe bigger than yourself. But at the same time, do you have people who may have those goals right now, but they still get wrapped up like, oh, I want to change, I want to give money back to charity, or I want to change my family's life, or whatever it is. Maybe more on the positive side, that's an opinion of mine. But if it is, then they still get wrapped up in it. They still get wrapped up in it where they're like pushing. And you said you had some conversations with other traders too, where you find that they're just so wrapped up around the market themselves. Is it just as simple as know that you're wrapped up around the market and just separate yourself? Or is there anything that you could give advice for people to really help them, even if they have a great goal, maybe they have a similar goal to you, but they're still struggling right now because they're trying to hold something too long because they don't want to lose or be, quote unquote, a failure, or they want to hold too long because they're like, this could be the one that really helps me grow. And that's in that sense. Is there anything you could tell those people that can help them separate from a good goal, even if it's a good goal, but separate that wrapness where it wraps them up and says, hey, this is your goal, but you got to do it?
Yeah. So there's a guy named Simon Sinek who wrote a book a number of years ago called Start With Why. And so, he kind of walks through the whole process, right? So many of us, we start at the end where we talk about how we're going to do something, right? We don't talk about what we're going to do. We don't talk about why we're going to do it, but we talk about how we're going to do. So for any trader out there, I'd say start with your why. Like, why are you trading in the first place? What's driving you, right? Like, what's that bigger thing you're going after? All right, cool. Then start to go into the what. But like, okay, cool. I'm going to trade. Like, I think trading is this thing that can move me towards this goal. And then you actually start getting into the how. All right, so how am I going to trade? What systems am I going to develop? Like, how am I going to execute my why in a market that's crap? Or how am I going to execute my why in a market that's really good? The problem is like most traders who I'd say are probably the more common retail over the last year or so, they haven't clearly defined a system. They haven't clearly said, this is how I'm going to trade in this market. This is how I'm going to trade in this market. They really just go, I'm gonna develop my one system and I'm always going to do this. It's like, well, you're starting with the wrong thing, right? That's not your why. It's not becoming a good swing trader. The goal is becoming a good trader, and swing trading can be a part of that. Breakout trading can be a part of that, but you've got to learn to adapt. Like, that's the biggest thing I found with people when I go, what's your system? What's your plan? They go, I don't know, make money. It's like, cool. Like, that's a great thing, right? That we should all want to do that in the markets, but how are you actually going to do that, right? People talk about diamond hands. They talk about buy low, sell higher. It's like, well, that's great, but like, how are you going to be able to identify when you're going to do that? How do you identify what's the right play to do that? Do you know the history of a stock? Do you understand what sectors run together? Do you understand how the SPY and the QQQ and all this stuff is going to impact your stocks? They're like, what's the SPY? It's like, oh my gosh, like, come on, man. Like, you've got to develop a way of thinking about this stuff so that you could properly execute to get you where you want to go.
Speaking of systems, elaborate what you mean by systems. And you can share like an example of what maybe you do yourself, but like, give us an example of what you mean by a system, because that's very vague. We can assume, I can assume I know what that means, but I want to understand what you mean by when you say have a system.
Yeah. So a very great example of somebody who does a fantastic job of this is Ripster. I'm sure you know who Ripster is. Ripster is absolutely amazing. He developed these EMA clouds. And so one of the things that he always talks about is this idea of only trade stocks that have strength or weakness if you're on the short side. And so for him, his system is based on these clouds. He's like, if on the 10-minute chart, it is riding these clouds up, then and only then will you continue to add size into the position that you're in. But the moment that a candle closes below the cloud, the 10 EMA cloud, and confirms with the next candle, that is when you cut the trade and walk away. Doesn't matter if you're up, doesn't matter if you're down. It's like your system has told you there is weakness in this play. The momentum is breaking down. So you need to go ahead and sell so that you can preserve your capital. That is just a great example of a system that I actually use pretty often when I'm trading specifically weekly options. I don't worry about it as much when I'm looking at like, leaps and things that are a couple years out. But when I'm trading weeklies that have an expiration date, it's like, well, yeah, that's my system. If it's riding the cloud up, I'm going to stay in it. If it goes into the cloud, I'm going to wait for the next candle. If it confirms that it breaks down, I'm cutting it. I'm not going to let hope that it might turn around and have a big bounce be the thing that keeps me in. I am going to just develop the system, trade the system. 7 times out of 10, it's going to work for me. 3 times it might, but the 7 where I win, it's going to be a lot more profitable than the 3 that I might lose on.
How'd you build faith in that? And because I don't know anything about the cloud myself. Okay. So I'm completely ignorant to this, but I want to know, how is that something that you kind of built some trust around? And do you fully understand and it's cool if you, I don't know anything about this. So like, do you fully understand the actual, what's behind the cloud and all that? Or do you just test it? You've learned that it works and you just, you know what, it works. I'm going to keep doing it. Where are you at in that spectrum?
Yeah, so I understand most of what's going on with the cloud. So the EMA cloud is just basically taking a lot of your different estimated moving averages and it's combining them into these 3 different things. So you're like, all right, here's like I think it's like the 50-day, you got the 30-day, then you got the 10-day. And so it's basically looking at the volume at which things have been sold in the past, right? What's the moving average? And is it continuing to go up or is it beginning to break down? Because typically if something is above the moving average, it's showing relative strength, right? That's a good thing. That typically means it's going to continue to rise. But typically if it is below that moving average, it's showing weakness. And that moving average then is actually resistance that is going to act as a barrier for the stock price to go up because there's going to be a bunch of people there who are wanting to sell. And so I have been using this now for about the last year. I saw Ripster posting about it tons before, and he posts so much educational content where like he'll show examples of trades he's taken and said, all right, here's how I use the clouds to walk this up. Here's what it did for me. When it broke down, here's where I sold. And then look what the stock did. It dropped like 10% after it did that. And so I have full confidence and faith in that system. And it's been a really helpful one. It works not only for doing options, it works for going long, it works for going short. I've seen it used on Tesla. When that thing has had huge drops, right? You could follow the cloud and the price will come up and test it and then drop right back down again.
Is it an actual cloud or y'all just call it that? Like, does it look
like
a cloud?
Yeah, it does. I can send you a
Yeah, because I know EMAs. When you started saying EMAs, I was like, oh, is it just mean the lines and in the area they call that the cloud? But
so what it does is it takes the main one, but then it also takes like a couple days on either side. So it expands it a little bit. But some people just use the basic EMAs, but the cloud, it gives you a much better indicator of where resistance or support could actually be beyond just that line.
So let's talk about that for a quick second. And when it comes to, let's just stick on that because some people may have a lot of interest in that. And I'm very curious about, because it's 3 lines. I know what you're talking about now. And once you said that, because when you pull it up, how do you gauge that the play is completely not working versus is? Because, so many people could see that and get faked out when it's like going above it if you're short or going below it if you're long. And then they'll end up ripping, going back up in their direction or down in their direction, depending on what position they're in. Any advice for those people who are trading a system that's like, hey, I trade a system, I trade VWAP, and maybe they love that and they found that it works, but they're always getting faked out, or maybe they're trading the cloud. Any advice you can give those people?
Yeah. So 2 pieces of advice. One, move off the 1 minute chart when you're trying to figure out what the actual direction of a stock is, right? On the 1 minute, you see so many different fake outs where people are like, oh, it just broke VWAP, like I'm going in. And then it falls right back down below, right? So if you want to actually get a good gauge of the actual momentum and direction of a trade and the strength of it, you got to move more to like a 5 minute or a 10-minute chart, because the 1 minute, it can be super wacky, but on a 5 and a 10, you actually have a much better idea of direction because it's taking everything that happened within that 5 minutes or that 10 minutes and saying, this is where it's actually landing. All right. So that's the first one. If you're doing like a quick 2-minute scalp, obviously be on the 30-second or the 1 minute. That's super helpful there. But if you're trying to be in a trade all day, move off the 1 minute, get to the 5, get to the 10, because you'll have a much more realistic picture of what's going on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this: always wait for confirmation, right? Far too often, it's easy to see something, tap VWAP, break off of it, or even the clouds or something like that, and be like, okay, this is my key to enter into the play, right? It just tapped it. It's like, well, yeah, but it could go right back down, right? It could just be somebody doing a market buy because they think it's going to happen, but then the shorts pile back in or drive it down or something along those lines. You always want to wait for the second candle to confirm it, right? So if you're on the 5, wait for 2 candles, right? Don't just wait for 1. You got to wait for a second one, because the second one is typically always the one that's going to confirm the move of the first candle that you were looking at.
But Nate, I wait for the second one and now my entry sucks. Like I'm way up here. The second one's way up there and I could have got in. What do I do?
You're trading strength though, man. You're trading weakness, depending on whether you're going long or short. The goal is not to be the first one in a trade and the first one out of a trade. The goal is to catch that middle part of the trade. If you try to be the person who catches every breakout, it's like, man, you are going to lose 6 out of 10 times. Right? Because there are way too many false breakouts. All right. And so this is where it comes back to the plan, right? I talked about having a plan at the very beginning. My plan is not to capture all of the move. It's just to capture a major part of the move. And I am totally okay not being the first one in the trade if it means I catch maybe 50% of the move, if that means that I've actually been protected from maybe losing 10% on a false breakout.
I like that. I like that you said that, because I mean, I went through that stage for like 2 years straight where I was just buying everything right when you get triggered. And then what happens? All these fake outs, you get frustrated. And you're right. If you just wait, you could probably get a better entry or more confirmation and maybe sizing comfortably and be able to ride that trend out.
And you wait for a dip, right? You always, everything dips. So the moment somebody on FinTwit calls something out, right? Like one of these big guys, you can look at the candle. You're like, dude, that's like 5 million shares that just got bought within 30 seconds of somebody tweeting. And some of that's bots, it's out. A lot of it is retail traders hopping in. And so you get a bunch of people who get this really high entry, but then it drops back down to almost where the opening of that last candle was within the next two candles. So if you can be patient, you can say, okay, I want to see if this move actually confirms, right? Like, are people going to hop on this? Is it going to show strength? Okay, then I'm going to enter then, because all of those initial people, because every time there's a big jump like that, there's a lot of people who have been holding that stock who are wanting to get out, right? Especially if you're trading penny stocks, like almost every penny stock out there has a ridiculous amount of bag holders who are just waiting for that spike to be able to sell their shares. It's got tons of people who are waiting for that spike to begin shorting it. And so if you can be patient, right? Again, not be controlled by your emotions, right? If you can't let greed take over, if you could actually go in and be strategic and say, okay, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna have a very targeted entry. And if X, Y, and Z all show up and they all confirm that this is a real move, then I'm gonna enter and then I'm gonna hang on to it. It gives you more conviction in the plays that you have, right? Because most times if somebody posts something, you hop in because it's breaking out. Odds are, outside of the ticker, you don't know anything about that stock. So why not take the 5 to 10 minutes while you're waiting for a move to confirm, do some basic research, look and see, is there any news? Do they have a shelf they can drop? What kind of catalysts do they have upcoming in the future? What about their debt, right? Did they close an offering recently? Like, you can look at all of that stuff within 5 to 10 minutes and be able to do a little fundamental analysis and go, yeah, this is actually a good trade. I'm going to get in. So great example. I actually did this yesterday. I hopped into ADMP, not yesterday. I actually waited till today, right? Like, everyone was in it yesterday. Things spiked up something like 25%. I love the news. I love the catalysts that they have coming up. But I also knew that there were way too many people who just hopped in here who are going to get impatient and they're going to sell. Well, today it dropped back down 22%, almost to the initial entry point of when everybody started buying yesterday. And so I saved myself 22% by not chasing after this thing. I got a much better entry. I was able to go in with size and conviction. And so it's a no stress trade for me.
Interesting. So you mentioned in the beginning that, you're a pastor, you're a father, you are a husband, you have your own kids, you foster kids. Those are all your kids, obviously. And then you also got your education while you're a pastor, all of this. So you're constantly doing things, and now you're trading. How do you manage all that? How do you manage that time? Because that's a lot of stuff. Because there's people right now who have a full-time job, who are married, they have kids, and they're like, man, I would really like to pick up trading, but I don't know how to do that. Like, I can't. And they need to find a reason or a method on how to do it. And you're able to do it. So can you explain just how you kind of manage your time?
Yeah. A lot of it has to do with exactly what you just said. It's time management, right? If we don't manage our time, somebody else is going to do that. And so for me, I've got a pretty strict schedule that I follow in my life. I get up at, right now it's about 3:30 in the morning. I spend 30, 45 minutes looking over the market. Did any news drop? Okay, what do I suspect is going to happen in the market today? And then I take a break. I go work out. I take care of my body, right? Because that's really important. I think if you're going to be a healthy trader, like, you've got to be healthy physically. I just really believe that. And then from 7 to 9 in the morning, after I've gotten the kids up, because I'm in Colorado, so markets open at 7:30 out here. 7 to 9, I'm just sitting at my computer. I'm trading. I'm identifying things that I want to do throughout the day. I create and I set all my alerts for the different plays that I'm looking at. Some I set up limit buys or limit sells based on what I'm holding at that time. But I use those 2 hours where I give all of my focus just to trading. And I got that idea from a book called Deep Work by a guy named Cal Newport. That basically, if you can dedicate like 100% of your attention to something for just like an hour or 2 hours, you are going to be far more productive in those 2 hours than you would be had you spent like 10 to 15 hours on the thing. And so I employ some of those principles and those practices into my trading for those 2 hours that I'm managing it. And then I go off and I do everything else I got to do, right? I'll set up alerts on my phone. If I get notified of a play, I might tweet it out and do some stuff like that. But I'm not glued to my computer all day. I'm not glued to my phone all day paying attention to trading, because I got other things I care about, other things I want to do. But it's the system I've developed, the rules that I have, and those 2 hours that I spend every morning identifying and working on plays. Those things really set me up for the rest of the day. So, like, great example. It's like, man, like, I already knew what I wanted to play today before the day even started. Right. And I took some trades. I didn't take a whole lot today just because I didn't really like the way the markets ended up shaping up. But I already had identified and written out, if this goes to here, I'm going to buy. If this goes to here, I'm going to sell. And if it doesn't, that's fine. Right. I'm not in a place where I want to be chasing after something. I'm not in this place where I feel like I always need to be in a trade. And so I've kind of identified my criteria of, this is what I'm looking for. And if my little notification pops up on my phone saying like, hey, skills just hit this price, it's like, cool. All right, I'm going to execute a buy order. Yep. Because I've already told myself that's where I want to buy the stock.
Yep. And you know what? Everyone needs to re-listen to that whole section, because preparation is key. Deep work. Shout out to that book. Is a really good book. I love that you just plug that book, because it's really good. And I agree with you, but it's interesting that you do so much preparation, which I love. And then you said, if then is so important. If this happens, then I do this. If this happens, then I do this. And that's how you're able to actually execute well. And then you also mentioned that if it doesn't happen, then I don't do anything. And so a lot of people have that challenge of just, if it doesn't happen, I'll just get in anyway, because I don't want to miss it. And I love that you're so focused on all that prep work, how you live your life, waking up at 3:30. That's like the earliest I used to wake up is 4:30 every day. Now it's 5:30, but like, that's ridiculous to me. And so you do that, and you do your whole systematic way of living, which helps you stay systematic in your trading, which helps you be systematic in everything you do. Right. And it's interesting that you do that. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I know there's people out there who are going to hear that and be like, I can't do this if I really put down some time. And all you need is like a real hour of dedication, like you were saying, an hour to 2 hours, to really focus and not have your phone tweet off or anything, any distractions. So I appreciate you saying that, for real. I usually ask people if they can go back in time and give themselves some advice, but I'm not going to ask you that question, because I feel like your journey is a little different, and I don't want to just throw that at you. What I'd rather ask you is, if one of your kids was like, you know what, Nate? Well, they would say dad, but I'm not going to call you dad. So you know what, Nate? Right. I want to trade, and that's what I want to do. In a short, quick response, what would you tell them, and to at least set them in the right path?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
And let's say you only had one day of your life left. You couldn't teach them. You couldn't sit there and teach them everything. You could only tell them something. What would you tell them?
Yeah. Wow, dude, made me all emotional thinking about having one day left with all my girls.
I don't mean it like that, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you. Honestly, the one thing I would tell them is this: don't get greedy. Like, for real. Like, don't get greedy when you do this, right? Because anybody can develop a system. Anybody can figure out what works for them. But 9 times out of 10, the thing that kills you, the thing that causes you to blow up your account, is when you get greedy, right? Where it's like, but I can make more. Or I'm going to go revenge trade because I just lost a bunch of money on this trade. So I'm going to go throw the rest of my account in this one and try to make it all back up. It's like, no, like, man, if you can not get greedy, if you can manage that emotional state right there, then kid, you're going to be fine. You're going to do great, right? Because some people, it might take 5 to 10 years to be able to develop a good system. That's fine. Others, it's 3 years. Others, it's a couple months. Like, we're all different. We're all wired with different kinds of capacities. But the one thing that every single human being deals with, regardless of which kind of system you have, is greed, right? And 9 times out of 10, the thing that keeps you in a trade way too long is greed. The thing that gets you out way too early is greed, right? So if we can master that emotional state, I think my kids would do great. And I think any trader would do great, right? You know, and to go back to what I said at the beginning, right? This is why I don't have a set goal of where I'm trying to get to with money. Because if I do, then I've basically set myself up to fail. Like, and that's not for everybody. That's just for me. But the moment I have that magical number I'm chasing after, it's like, all right, like I'm gonna struggle here with that.
I love it. Well, Nate, look, man, it's been such a pleasure. I want you to tell everyone if they have any questions about it, want to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you and where? Go ahead, my man.
Yeah, easiest place to find me, it's Nate_Davis on Twitter. I'm pretty active there throughout the day. I'll post things that I see, things that are working, super honest and transparent. But more than that, like I engage with everybody who sends me a DM. So if you do, I promise I'll get back to you. My goal is just really to help. I know when I started, there were people who helped me learn some things when I had questions. And so I've always made the commitment, man, I'm going to help people as much as I possibly can because I want to see you guys be successful. I want to see you guys achieve your dreams and to really be able to do these things that you're wanting to do, the things that brought you into trading in the first place.
Awesome. Well, Nate, hey, it was a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. And again, thank you so much for sharing some real wisdom, my man.
Absolutely, bro.